ever so. Hey, Ally, how are you?
I'm good, Jen. How are you?
Oh, delightful. Technology and we've been having a week. So, yeah.
That's okay. At least today, we're not talking about tech. Today, we're talking about something else entirely, which is fun. Hey, look, you did get the banner to go. So yay. We're all about copyright, AI, and IP today. Hopefully we've got people joining us live because of our special guest that's going to be with us. But before we dive into all of the things, we want to begin by reintroducing Unscripted with Ally and Jen. What's this all about, and what are we about, and why the hell are we here? So Unscripted with Ally and Jen, the Clip Notes version. This is Jen and Mai's way of giving the dish, the dirt, the deets on writing and publishing your nonfiction book and doing it the right way. And so we are bringing our combined expertise as authors and as coaches and ghostwriters and publishers. We'll tell you which one is which in a second, to the table so that you all learn what you need to learn in order to be successful doing all of those things. So that's the quick and dirty version of Unscripted. Jen, who are you? What do you do in the publishing space?
All right, beautiful. Thank you, Ally. I love that you always tee it up so beautifully. I just have to come over and hit the ball. So my name is Jen Grace. I am the founder of Publisher Purpose, and we are a hybrid book publisher with a focus on nonfiction books specifically. And the authors that we work best with are people who are motivated to get their message out into the world, which may or may not be just the book. And so our kind of focus as a company is really supporting our authors from a 360-degree perspective. So it's not just, hey, you have this book, now you have to go try to figure out what to do with it. Rather, we can be here to collaborate with you to help you figure out what are the other things that you might also need alongside your book.
Amazing. And I am Ally. I am the CEO and founder of The Right Place, Right Time. I am an international book coach and ghostwriter and developmental editor. Memoir is my sweet spot. But apart from that, I like to work on personal and professional development books. So I'm 100% nonfiction. And I also have a real passion and mission for helping diversified voices find the ways to elevate their stories and messages, because we need more of that in the literary canon. So I'm happy to be here as a writing guide and support for those people who are looking to light up the world with their books. Yeah. I want to just let everyone know, because our comments only go to YouTube. They don't tend to go to LinkedIn. If you are here live with us, please let us know and start gearing up your questions as we segue over into our topic of today. Unless, Jen, there's any other housekeeping items that we need to review before we go there.
No, I don't think so. Just the emphasis on, let us know your questions, because we have an amazing expert who knows a lot of things, who is going to guide us in this conversation.
Awesome. So let's bring that expert in from behind the studio, and I will do a proper and formal introduction. Barbara and Gracia. Did I say that last name right? I should have asked. Oh, yes. All right. Has a passion for raising awareness about the role of copyright law in our daily lives while bringing some fun to a heavy but important topic. Copyright in the digital age can seem like a gray, murky ooze full of potholes and quicksand. With the explosive arrival of ChatGPT on the public scene in 2022, the potholes have become seemingly bottomless and the quicksand inescapable. Barbara equips businesses to navigate the ever-shifting legal landscape to achieve their goals and protect what they create from online thieves eager to steal their precious intellectual property. This is a really fun bio. Can I just stop and say that? I just love being able to say thieves in the middle of an introduction. We are all consumers and creators of copyright-protected content. With the advent of artificial intelligence, it's even more important to understand basic copywriting skills. Barbara is from an academic library background. As print evolved into electronic, she began negotiating licenses for access, and that rolled over into copyright compliance education. She has several certifications in copyright and licensing and has been navigating the gray, murky ooze that is copyright since 2008. She enjoys working with individuals to register their copyrights with the U.S. Copyright Office and review their websites for compliance with federal regulations, industry best practices, and copyright law, making sure their legal ducks are in a row. Welcome, Barb. Oh my gosh. I can't wait to tap your brain.
Thanks so much, Ally and Jen. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you because you are leaders in the field. So
we appreciate that. Some days I'm not so sure, but I appreciate that it looks like that from the outside.
Agreed.
So Barb, we want to toss you a softball question just to begin. And we got a little touch of this in your bio, but give us a little bit more on the origins of how you became involved in copyright compliance.
Well, as my bio says, I forgot that it said that. I come from an academic library background. So I want to be very upfront about, I'm not an attorney. So anything I say is educational information and not legal.
Cannot be used against you in the court of law.
Right.
Said like an attorney.
Right. Yeah, I can say it depends as well as anybody, which is a typical answer to a copyright off-the-cuff question. It depends. So as print evolved into electronic and libraries were facing, what are we going to do with that stuff? What are we going to do about our print journals? How are we going to retain access to electronic journals? Because electronic journals you're just renting, and the switch could be turned off at any time. So I began negotiating licenses for access to those. Learned some interesting things along the way. And that rolled over into copyright compliance education, where I served as the filter between faculty, students, staff, administration, I guess that's about it, and legal counsel. And legal counsel didn't want questions like, oh, I don't see a C in a circle, so it must be okay to use this. And as you said, I see copyright as a gray, murky ooze, always shifting, hard to pin down. So if I would get up to my chin in gray, murky ooze, I would call on legal counsel, and they would throw me a rope and pull me out of the quicksand and keep me going. And I've really enjoyed that. Coming out of the back room, as it were, I was a tech services person, and coming out of the back room and sharing my passion as I learned, as I go along. So it just has continued to develop. As you pointed out, I have some certifications, and I enjoy teaching. I enjoy presenting to groups, professional groups. I've taught a course for the Medical Library Association that I have entitled Copyright Skills as Risk Management Tools. And I believe that copyright skills are an important 21st century life skill. Now, we see AI zoom onto the horizon and plunk. November 30th, 2022 dawned like any other day. People went to school, people went to work, but there was this technological explosion. And ChatGPT burst on the scene, and suddenly we public people had access to AI that we could manipulate. And we know that has just exploded. So, and it's been all about, creating good prompts. And, I want people, as a librarian, I want people to have all sides of the story. So the implications with copyright are important for context, and are coming up with good practices so that we are comfortable with what we don't know what's coming. Many court cases are pending, and it'll take years for those to wind through the courts. So what can we do to be as in control as we can be?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things that I want to tap into, but before we do, and Jen, you can stop me if you don't want to go down this route, but I think we need to do just some like basic education for viewers and listeners. We've thrown around words like intellectual property, copyright, plagiarism is one that I would want to put in here, right? Because it's really adjacent to all of these things.
Yeah.
And for our first time authors who it's been a long time since they've had to cite or reference anything, perhaps, and they're writing nonfiction books especially, right? Which a lot of the times can, reference a lot of other people's work. I think doing just a little kind of glossary primer might be helpful to our audience just to define some of these terms so that we can then talk about them in context of different situations that authors might come against. Does that sound okay to you, Jen?
No.
Yeah. Let's do like a rapid fire, like word and definition.
Woo! All right, Bob, you're in the hot seat. All right, first word, intellectual property.
That's the intangibles that we create. We know about physical property, but the intellectual property is intangible. And it's protected by copyright or trademark or patent or trade secrets. So it is property, but it's harder for us to recognize it.
Okay, give us examples.
I was going to say, is it fair to say that all the things that we're talking about in this conversation fall under the umbrella of intellectual property?
Yes, and the fact that we are sitting in offices and whatnot, somebody thought of those. And so those were intellectual property until they were produced and became physical property. Copyright protects the expression of ideas and not the ideas themselves. And that's confusing for people because they'll say, oh, they stole my idea. Well, if you never put it into a tangible format,
okay,
you're out of luck.
That's a great distinction actually to make for people. That's not the stealing of idea, it's the expression of the idea.
It protects original works of authorship that are fixed in a tangible medium, paper, audio, video, computer, and where was I going with it? Oh, so that's a protection. Authorship is broadly defined. So it's not only text, but also audio, video, music, sound recording, sculpture, even choreography. So if you can capture it, you can protect it.
Okay. So if there's some way to get it out of our head and into some other format, it can be protected.
I used to say that you could even just write some notes on a paper napkin and that would be protected. Now you'd probably just dictate into your phone. But that idea that it doesn't have to be a big fancy deal to get started. We're all sort of in the Boston area, more or less. And if someone scribbles on a piece of paper and it's on the floor of the MBTA, the Green Line, whatever, that is protected by copyright. We might not know who the author is, but that is protected by copyright and doesn't have to have the C in the circle. Whoops, where is it here? Doesn't have to be registered with the U.S. Copyright Office, although those are important things to consider.
Okay. What about trademark? Explain that.
People are confused by the difference between copyright and trademark. So copyright is protecting the expression. Trademark protects your brand, your appearance in the marketplace. So I like to use a Coca-Cola bottle as an example. The shape was very unique and it was patented in 1915. The logo, is their trademark. Their advertising content would be their copyright, and they are the ultimate because they have a trade secret. Supposedly no one person knows the exact formula for Coca-Cola. Scientists have dissected it and they know what's in it, but they don't know what gives it that special spark. So they've done copyright, trademark, patent, trade secrets.
Okay, now I think there's something in here though that I want to distinguish for people. Something can be under copyright protection without necessarily being registered with the office, but a trademark, right? Trademark means it's specifically gone through a process, and therefore if anybody else cites or references that product, it must appear with the standard TM in the little superscript next to that trademark product, correct?
Right. And once it's registered with the USPTO, you get to use the R in the circle. So people don't have to register their trademark, but again, it's not protected. They might register it in their state, but somebody else could swoop in with the US-wide trademark. And trademarks are a national thing. Copyright is international, more or less. Every country has their own little flavor, but trademark is something that is very nation specific. And so you might have to trademark in several countries, or there are ways to do a sort of a blanket trademark once you have the trademark in your own country. But I like to use the examples of Dove. We've got Dove soap. We've got Dove candy. Both have the same trademark, but there are many categories that you can register your trademark in. So Dove candy is in candy, and Dove soap is in soap. And as long as they stay in their lanes, there's no problem.
Okay.
And the reason for that is to prevent market confusion for consumers.
Exactly. So that so that the public is not confused by who's the source of this. And if I'm doing a good job, I don't want somebody else using my same name, and maybe they're doing an awful job. So it is a matter of protection for the public.
Okay. So there's also like an integrity piece in addition to like not having there be confusion about the products and what they represent. Barb, you did a great job with rapid fire. Folks, if you're still confused about the definitions and the distinctions between those words, then please, pop those questions for clarity into the comments so we can take a look at those and have Barb help us tease them out. But Jen, I saw you writing some stuff down, so I'm guessing you've got some questions that have percolated, and I'm going to stop talking now.
Maybe we could just bounce back and forth with our questions, like a rapid line of fire over here between the two of us, Barb, as you are well aware. So you were talking about the copyright, right? When you were saying that this piece of paper could have landed on the floor of the green line, and it inherently has a copyright to it because it's out of someone's head and it's on paper, but it may not have been formally registered.
Right.
When we think about books, there is an inherent copyright by the fact that the mere book exists. So can you kind of like frame that out? Because I've definitely had conversations with authors who don't fully understand how that all works, where, all right, I'm in the active process of writing my manuscript with Ally, or I'm actively in the process of putting it into a book with Jen. But is the copyright that is just inherently granted enough, or do they really need to go to that next step and have it registered with the U.S. Copyright Office?
Well, I always advocate for people to use a C in a circle, and I'm sure that you do that with your authors. But then that next step gives teeth. You don't have to register, or the C in the circle is really just sort of common law protection, and it would be very difficult to defend. So registering gives you teeth, and should you have to file a lawsuit in a federal court in the U.S., it must be registered. So some of the AI cases have been sort of deferred and can come back, but have been deferred because the plaintiffs hadn't registered their works that they are trying to protect. So it's a very important tool, and anything that's really critical to your business or your work, I believe, should be registered. That doesn't mean everything has to be registered, but if you would be really upset if you saw your work someplace else with somebody else's name on it, it would be a good idea to have registered that.
Actually, perfect book example. And I think, Jen, you were one of the people that I wrote to when this happened, to an author of mine, because I was like, I have no idea. She hadn't yet published yet. She was maybe 2 weeks out, a month, like from actual publication date, but some AI engine somewhere got a hold of the manuscript and started to basically distribute it for free. And so what I did was I was like, this is out of my expertise. I'm going to go hit up some publishers and see what they know. Of course, to some extent, a little bit of this was new terrain because of the AI engine kind of swooping it up. And we didn't really know how that happened. Where did they find this file if she was the only one that, but apart from never figuring out how they even got a hold of it, one of the pieces of advice really became, well, write to them, let them know it's your property, and, prove that it's your property with your US copyright registration. And unfortunately, at the time, that hadn't been registered yet. So exactly to your point, Barb, about, just because that little C in the circle is on something, doesn't necessarily give you all of the teeth or all of the legal power to defend your work if it's eaten up and spit back out by somebody else who doesn't actually, own it. So I think, yes, register if you can. If you don't know how, find support that will help you. Actually, Barb, is that one of the services that you provide? Do you help people file? Okay.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes, and it's a very inexpensive thing. In the U.S., your work is protected when it's a personal author for the life of the author plus 70 years. So if you publish young and die old, and then your heirs have your legacy for a long time, and you're for less than $100. You can't get insurance any cheaper than that. Now, we could debate whether or not the duration of copyright is too long, but we won't.
Now, at that 70 plus years after death, that's when something goes into what we call the public domain. Yes?
Correct.
Okay. For our listeners, what does it mean when something becomes a part of the public domain?
It's no longer protected by copyright. So it can be used in any way, taken apart, put back together, reworked, adaptations made. If it's sheet music, use the tune with different words, use the words with a different tune. So you really have carte blanche to use it. And it's because it's no longer under copyright protection. In the United States, right now, copyright has been retroactively renewed for 95 years. So it's works from pre 1929 that are in the public domain. Ours is one of the longest. We went through a 20-year drought, and nothing came into the public domain for 20 years. Canada is now going into that drought. That's a very sad thing.
So I wonder. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
Just about the public domain, like, so once it's in the public, once it hits that 70 years after, or 95, it is in the public domain, and that there's no coming back from that unless somebody. But the originator is now gone, so there's no way for them to kind of actively try to maintain that, right? So like, it's just once it's in the public domain, it's just there. Yes.
Yes, and so, for example, Mickey Mouse just came into the public domain. Not the Mickey Mouse we would recognize, but the early Mickey Mouse. Same with Winnie the Pooh. The Great Gatsby came into the public domain a couple of years ago. And the heirs really fought it going into the public domain because you lose control of it. And you don't know what somebody's going to come up with. And there have been some very weird Winnie the Poohs and Mickey Mouses already. So in a way, you want to protect your, reputation and your legacy. And some countries do that more strenuously. France, for one. Yes, once it's expired, it's free domain. And I want to say that there's a difference between music and sound recordings. Music is the composition and the lyrics. Typically, we would see in sheet music. Sound recordings are much more recent, and so weren't scheduled to start coming into the public domain for another 40 years. But with a recent Music Modernization Act, some are now filtering in, but it's not going to be the top 40 yet that are accessible. So sometimes people want to play music at an event, and they need to think twice about that.
So I want to kind of tie this back into like nonfiction authors, because I see this a lot as the book coach and developmental editor and ghostwriter. People want to use poems, quotes, paragraphs, data, whatever it is to help to illustrate their point or argue their point or whatever it is. And I'm constantly telling them, asking them, do you have permission to use this? And one of the things that we have to kind of sort out is it a part of the public domain, which means that you can use it without permissions. If it's not a part of the public domain, then we either need to have permissions or we need to understand the style and rule around how much of somebody else's work you can use without being in copyright infringement, right? So with poems, it's like only so many words or lines. Song lyrics, it's only so many words, right? I think for longer texts, it's also like a word limitation. I don't remember them all off the top of my head because it all depends, as Barb said. So you have to go and kind of figure it out. But this is why this whole conversation around public domain is important, because just because you think somebody is old and dead and gone doesn't necessarily mean that you have the right to use their stuff without quotation, citation, and referencing. And any medium, that's including people who want to do an art and visual studies book and you want to pull in a picture of the Mona Lisa. Okay, you've got to know if the material you're going to put in your book is available to you, or you need to go through the appropriate channels to get the permission. Now, beyond books, I also want authors to be thinking about this from a marketing and platform perspective. It's great that you maybe want to make a reel or a YouTube intro song or whatever, right? But you still need to make sure that if there's music involved or visuals involved that are not free for you to use, they would call them copyright free images, right? Or copyright free music. Correct me if I'm wrong, Barb. You would need to have permission to do all of those things. So, and another beautiful example, going back to trademarks and logos, and this just came up for me recently. So Do Not Write a Book Until You Read This One came out. And my co-author and I were discussing being able to put up on our webpage all the places that the book was available: Walmart, Target, Barnes and Noble, right? And I was just about to go and do this thing when I thought, wait a minute, I don't know that I have permission to use all of those very specifically branded, trademarked logos to just take snips or download free images and like upload them to my website. So I started to Google Walmart logo access and Target access, and every single one of these big chains had very specific requirements for using their logo, and almost all of them said that you couldn't. Long story short, okay. So
basically, if in doubt, don't.
Exactly. Just because we can all access a bunch of free stuff via Google Images or whatever doesn't mean that we should. Doesn't mean that it's technically legal. Okay. And so that's kind of the parts and pieces of this conversation around the copyright and public domain stuff that I really want to make authors aware of. Jen, did you want to piggyback off of that at all?
Oh my God, there's a million different directions my mind is going. I feel like it is going to derail us, but, or maybe not. Maybe it's just kind of deepening what you just were asking, Ally. Barb, when it comes to kind of the general parameters and metrics for a song lyrics, for example, this comes up all the time in our editing process where someone wants to include song lyrics. Is there a general rule of thumb that we can kind of, because I feel like song lyrics seem like a little bit universal for a lot of books. Is there a general rule you can't use more than a certain amount that we can just kind of say, I know it depends, but is there something you would tell someone who's watching this and that might be a question they have?
Well, actually, the law in the United States, which is very old, 1976 was the last time they did a full overhaul. There are no percentages. There are no numbers in the law. So some of these numbers and whatnot have come through conversations or what publishers would like to see. So it depends. Maybe, and we won't go far with this, maybe a fair use argument could be made. And fair is defined very oddly. But basically, don't use lyrics. Just avoid. You might be able to use a trademarked company name. You probably can say something about McDonald's, but you probably should have the R in a circle at least the first time you do that. I always say that it's best to assume that any content you come across, and let's say the internet because it's so easy, anything, you should assume that it's protected by copyright until you can prove otherwise. So sort of guilty until proven innocent. And you mentioned just because you can doesn't mean you should. I have one of my slides along that line too. Just because you can right click and copy and paste or screenshot doesn't mean you should. And that rolls over into AI also. The ethics of, yes, you can use AI, but should you?
Yeah. Can I ask one more question on this, and then Ally, we can kind of redirect along the exact same lines in terms of like when you're bringing in source material from somebody else. We know that, Ingram platforms, Amazon platforms, the distribution platforms have AI that are like robots that are kind of skimming the content that's being uploaded into their systems for copyright issues, right? So like if you were using a big passage of someone else's work, it might get flagged even if you do have permission from the source, and then you have to kind of negotiate. It's a whole thing. But is there a general rule from a word count standpoint that maybe would be helpful for someone? Because, we're working with an author right now, for example, who had, it was like 1,500 words directly taken from somewhere else where he had it sourced and everything. And I'm like, we can't, that doesn't work. And so now he's removing a lot of things that he was, and I was like, just put them on a website, direct them to somewhere else. There's other ways to do it that we can remove the legality from this. But is there, I think our style guide says 100 words. I think our style guide is very, very conservative because I don't want to get us into any of the gray, murky territory that you spoke of. But is there something you would say again to someone watching this?
Well, some of it depends on your tolerance for risk. There are people who say, I'm not going to do anything without permission. And then there are those who say, permission. If I get caught or they object, I'll buy my way out of it. So we really need to be somewhere in between. And often it depends on the situation. Music lyrics are really touchy. And so I would discourage the use of that. Now, certainly at the heads of chapters, we'll see quotes from famous people, and it's a sentence or whatever, and we attribute it. Eleanor Roosevelt, Martin Luther King, whoever. And so short things can't be copyrighted. Titles can't be copyrighted. And people think, oh no, there are all these books with the same title as mine. It's the guts inside that matter. Titles can't be copyrighted. Short phrases, data, facts, commonly held knowledge like measurements and standard forms and things. So not everything is protected by copyright, even though it may seem so. But if you exercise the assume until you can prove, then you're going to be safe. Now, in terms of citations, I want to point out that so much stuff's floating around out there, and there are certain people who never had to hand copy out of the Britannica. Think, oh, it's floating around out there, so it's free to take. Why would anybody put it out there if they didn't want me to take it? And I can technologically take it. So what's the big deal? And I have to talk those people off the cliff, and I'm sure you do too. And people will say, well, if I credit, if I give a citation, that's cool, right? Well, a citation is not permission. It might be okay, but it's not an automatic thing. And people will say, well, I gave the author credit. No, that's not the same as permission.
Oh, this is so beautiful.
Your example, 1,500 words. When you think about how many pages of a published book 1,500 words is, that's pages of somebody else's already written content, which begs the question, can you not paraphrase it? Can you not figure out what of those 1,500 words of somebody else's matter the most to your argument to then drill it down and share in your own words while still giving reference, to the person that you originally got the information from, right? Yeah. It's totally great to think that somebody else's stuff is like the cat's meow and to want to promote what they're saying because it directly aligns with what you're saying. But at the end of the day, it's your book. So you need to write your voice and you need to put things in your terms. And we can't just lift pages or paragraphs worth of somebody else's stuff, even if it's in, direct quotes and it's in block style paragraphing to indicate that it came from somewhere else. Right. So I think really, if nothing else from today, when in doubt, ask. And, if it belongs to somebody else originally, flag that and make a determination what you need to do with it and consult with your publisher or an IP lawyer, before you're hitting the publish button. Be in integrity, be ethical, right? You wouldn't want anybody else to lift 1,500 words of yours and slap it into their book with your name on it, right? So I think
paraphrasing can work if it's done thoroughly. Yeah. You might be able to dive down into those 1,500 words and come away with, oh, what's the idea? And how can I express that idea differently?
Yeah.
So
we've got a question about Windex in the comments, and then I want to segue this over to AI. So the person says, so no Windex ? I think going back to the idea of, can you use a brand product in your book?
Well, I'm going to say it depends, but typically you might.
That's what we should have titled this live stream. Yeah. Copyright and AI, it depends.
It really answers any question. I would recommend, putting the little R in a circle. But the interesting thing about many of these items is they were trademarked, and because their companies didn't defend those became generic. So we talk about Kleenex. That was trademarked. Elevator, escalator, Xerox, although they're working to get theirs back. You go, I'm going to go Xerox this. So, and that was a perfect trademark because it didn't mean anything. It was totally made up word, which is the best. So it's interesting how some things have come into our language. And maybe someone has turned the word Windex into a verb. I'm going to Windex that, but I'm not sure I've heard that happen.
So interesting to think that it wasn't defended and that's how it became a more generic term for. That's
Yeah.
so, I never would have thought of that. That's so fascinating.
Aspirin, Scotch tape.
Yeah.
Well, my advice as the writing coach would say, if you can, limit the amount of use of these big brand name products that everybody knows. Again, err on the side of caution. Use the registered or trademark symbol with the mention of the product, and just be mindful, right? Like, it's about integrity. We're going back to integrity, which is exactly how this whole Unscripted with Ally and Jenn even began. That was, I think, our very first episode was about integrity. Like, don't hang your hat on this product in an idea that you're going to get more sales that way. And I don't think that this user who's asking this question is doing that, but I think where these things become sticky and become problematic, right, is when somebody is trying to use somebody else's logo, brand product, registered product, whatever it is, for their own personal gain. That's when we've got an issue. When you're promoting the product because you love it and you're like a fangirl or boy, right, and you're an ambassador of the product, or brand, I think that's a little bit different. But it's, I think to some extent it's going to be, how are you using it? How are you citing it? Right? Because if there was a legal something or other, they would want to show that you did your due diligence to give the right permission and citation and all those things, right, to this thing that doesn't belong to you. So, oh my gosh, we could talk about this literally forever. It's 1:44 and we haven't even touched on AI. So, let's go 5 minutes on AI, which I know is not nearly freaking enough. But I think now that we've got like a baseline context, right? Copyright, plagiarism, citation, public domain, all of these things segue perfectly into whether or not to AI, whether or not to specifically, I think, from my perspective, use ChatGPT to write. I use this write your book, which Jen and I have very strong feelings about. But we're here with Barb, the guest expert. Barb,
your March episode, your March 2024 episode, you made that very clear.
All right. So Barb, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
Well, some of the exclusive rights of a copyright owner are to copy, reproduce, distribute, adapt, create derivative works, display publicly, perform publicly, and license any or all of those rights to others, and probably as a non-exclusive license, because you're not going to just give the whole thing away. Well, you might for the right situation. AI comes along, or AI online comes along, and just trolls everything, scoops up everything in the net, and then I like to say they put it into a stew and then ran it through a blender, so that supposedly you can't put two and two together and come up with a previously copyrighted work. Now, there are cases that people are finding that their work is showing up. The case you mentioned earlier with a client, I don't know how that really came together as through an AI blender. But so AI didn't ask anybody. At least nobody was compensated. At least I haven't gotten a check. I don't know about you. And it threatens my livelihood. AI Online says this is transformative. This is a fair use because it's being done for a different use, a different purpose. But one of the factors in fair use, and that gets nasty too, complicated, it's not a slam dunk, is what I'll just say, is what's what's the effect of that new work on the market? And we know that there are many artists and whatnot that are being replaced by robots. You can say, draw such and such in the style of, well, if it's Van Gogh, that's fine. He's long dead and long in the public domain. But if you and I are artists and someone says, do it in the style of Jen or Ally or Barb, yeah, we're still around and we're still trying to make a living with our creative skills. I don't know how it's going to come out. There's arguments on both sides, but I feel that there are dangers with AI. So they stole people's stuff. Whether or not that was legal is to be determined. And then we put in prompts. And what we get out, who really owns that? Does AI Online own that? Is it a derivative work from the authors whose mush has been regurgitated? Because you can rarely find citations, the whole business of citing work that's not yours is a big red flag. And even those systems that claim that they can give citations and resources, oftentimes those don't exist. You try to track them back and they aren't there. So it's an issue for, is AI legal? And that's in the courts. How do I protect my stuff? I want to be asked. I want to be compensated. That's the direction some platforms are going. Reddit, for example, are licensing the content that they have. So how is the author, the creator, going to be compensated through that? It's as if, okay, if it's licensed, we're not gonna fight with AI Online because they have licensed it from us. So there are a lot of it's magic, and it's wonderful magic. And we've probably been taught if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And it's a red flag to consider further. So using AI as a tool for sorting and organizing and whatnot is one thing, as you pointed out. But writing, using it to write, Amazon makes you declare something. You can copyright works that include AI, but you can't include that in the protection. Just as if you use something from the public domain, your comments around it or your variations are eligible for copyright. But as you pointed out, the public domain doesn't go back into copyright. Tomorrow, I want to point out is National AI Literacy Day. And so there are lots of wonderful resources for teachers and whatnot.
I love that our immediate reactions are like, what's this BS? Like both of us immediately.
Yeah.
You said it for teachers.
It's interesting. There are some curricula now that address ethics, the ethics of AI, and I think that's important.
Yeah. We probably poo-pooed a little too quickly because in reality, right, like we want the next generation, we want this generation to be good digital citizens, right? And by extension of that, ethics and best practices around AI use is extremely important. And I think we have to catch our kiddos, especially because they are learning how to develop material. They're learning how to write. They're learning how to research. They're learning how to defend their own arguments. And AI is now going to make it easier to get things done, but not necessarily in the best, most in ethical or in integrity kind of way. And we rely on our teachers, right, to educate in these and kind of be the front line of these changing developments. But yeah, we need some best practices, because right now it feels like the Wild West,
Exactly.
Unfounded territory, no rules or laws. Okay, we've got Sheila in the comments. Could you speak more about copywriting ideas? At times after I've written about some concept, I may read later in someone else's book the same notion explained differently, but essentially the same. Am I cheating? I mean, Barb, weigh in here, but my thought would be there is no truly original ideas at this point when it comes to what we say in our books. It's only original ways that we express them.
Exactly.
So Sheila, you might be saying you might be making the same underlying point as Jen in her book or me in my book, but you're going to have your own words, your own voice, and your own way of getting to the same place. That's not like a direct quote. So no, you're not cheating. You're being human.
Well said.
One of the other things I caution people about is registering their copyright, but also making sure that their website, that is the heart and hub of their business, making sure, as you mentioned, that those legal ducks are in a row, so that it's a secure foundation. Somebody can't come back and say, well, you didn't tell me. Well, assumption is not a business model. So yeah, people ought to know what's right and wrong, but they don't.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Can I just conclude, Barb, and what your advice would be around AI? Like, is it for right now, given the fact that there's court cases and such happening, trying to figure out where things are going to land, would a general piece of advice be to just not include it in books until there's some kind of legal precedent for it?
I think that's true. And I know some publishers are here and some publishers are there. I read that Medium, the
oh yeah,
posting, whatever, they have said no AI, or if it's AI, it goes into a different category and gets less distribution. So that's interesting how they have come down to that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, let's do some rapid fire takeaways from today's conversation. What do we want our authors to take away from today? Jen, what's the thing that comes to mind for you the most?
The two things that came to mind for me are that the inherent copyright that you gain by simply publishing is not enough, and that trademarking is in multiple countries, not just the United States. Those are my two big takeaways.
Awesome. Barb, anything that came up in conversation that felt new to you? This is your space, so it's probably all been said, but what's new, or what would you underscore? What would you like? Okay, if you walk away with nothing else, this is the thing that you should know.
Well, this is sort of an add-on for our political situation. We're in an election year in the United States, and so we need to exercise critical thinking and fact-checking. And there is an organization.
You speak nonsense. There will be no fact-checking here.
The International Fact Checkers Network. And so we know Snopes, and we know NPR fact-checking and Washington Post. So just that integrity part, we need to be aware and not believe everything we read, not believe everything we hear. And we can see from the effects of social media how that has happened. And so with AI, it's the same thing. Did the Pope really wear a white puffy coat? No. Did George Carlin actually make a new comedy video? No. So it's becoming more difficult to sort out and discern what is true and what is fake.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, 100%. For me, I'm going to underline put your integrity and your ethics first. Okay. Your book is your namesake. Your book is your legacy. Your book is your real estate. It's a representation and an extension of you. So think about your reputation and how you want people to be viewing you and your book. That is what comes first. And that's the filter for which you should make decisions about what you're including and how you're including it. And again, when in doubt, err on the side of caution and seek consultation and professional support to make these decisions, so that you're saving your ass in the long run and you're protecting your content in the long run. Can I get an amen?
Yeah, amen. And I have a story that one of my instructors told. You tell two lawyers the exact same facts, because copyright is very fact-based. And they go off, and they're supposed to come back with an opinion. Well, so these two lawyers go off, and they come back with 3 opinions. So, that's you can make numbers or whatever, say whatever you want to. So
Yeah. So Barb, before we part ways, is there something that you would like to share with the audience that's coming up for you, a resource that you have, a place where you would like them to connect with you?
Well, they can connect with me at barb@managecopyright.com. And I do have an AI guide. And I put that link, sent you guys that link. I don't know if you can build that in somehow, where you can opt in to receive this guide that goes into some of these AI things in a little more detail.
Beautiful. So we'll either get that back into the show description, or we'll drop it into the comments on the channels. I'm sure people have access to that.
Yes, I need the AI guide myself.
I want to know what's in there, and I want to send it to everybody I know. Jen, something coming up for you that you want to highlight for folks before we wrap up?
Yes, I have a workshop on May 14th. I probably should fact check that date. I believe it's May 14th. It is called From Writing to Revenue, Empowering Nonfiction Authors for Business Growth. So it's a little more in depth of a conversation, Ally, that you and I were having on a previous episode of this, about kind of the business models that surround an author's book and how to really be mindful of those at the start of the process.
Love it. And folks, the one thing that I really just want to highlight for all of you today is that I do have a 12-week group program called the Memoir Blueprint. So if you're interested in writing memoir, you want a strong foundation to doing that well, then I really encourage you to reach out to me. I'd love to set up a 20-minute call to tell you more about that program and what you get in working with me in that space, so that you can write an emotionally compelling memoir the right way from the beginning. All right, we are going to be back again next month sometime. Let me see what date might that be. Oh, look at that. I just clicked on it. May 16th. We'll be back with you all with another Unscripted with Ally and Jenn. We have not determined that topic, so just be sure to watch the space. Join us next month, 1 o'clock Eastern. Barb, thanks so much for this fantastic conversation. I feel like we're going to need to do a part 2 later on in the year or something, because
when things are perhaps less murky.
Well, I kind of doubt it, but I still feel like we've got so many offshoots of this conversation to have. So we'll be bringing you back, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. This has been great fun, and thank you for the opportunity to share some things that I feel strongly about.
We're so glad that you're out there in the world doing this work, because it's so important.
Yeah. Thank you, Barb. It's amazing. All right. We'll see everyone next month. Thank you both. Talk to you all soon.